Listen to my story about a man named Jed. A poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was shooting at some food, and up through the ground come a bubbling crude oil, that is, black gold, Texas tea. Well, the first thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. The kinfolk said, Jed, move away from there. Said, California is the place you ought to be. So they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly Hills, that is, swimming pools, movie stars.
The Beverly Hillbilly.
The terms hillbilly and redneck get tossed around in modern society as derogatory terms for people who live in rural communities. While most people are familiar with the words, many aren't aware of their interesting origins and how it relates to the history of the Scots Irish Presbyterians that settled in America. To get the full backstory, we must go all the way back to the 16th century to the beginnings of the Scottish Reformation. John Knox, a former Catholic priest, had embraced the Protestant faith after becoming close to a reformer named George Wishart. After converting, Knox acted as Wishart's bodyguard, but George was arrested and burnt at the stake in 1546. After the martyrdom, Knox and the Reform movement gained popular attention, and a new church began to develop throughout Scotland known as Presbyterianism. By 1638, the Scottish Presbyterians had run into political issues with King James and his son Charles. This is because the Church of England was to be the state religion throughout the kingdom, and the Scottish Protestants had created a much different system. While the Church of England was hierarchical in nature and ruled by the king, the Presbyterians held their services in kirks, where the congregation was egalitarian, with each church electing their own officials. Many Presbyterians claimed that the New English Church was no less corrupt than the Catholicism they had broken away from, and that the Pope had simply been replaced by Charles. The more that England tried to press their new state religion onto the Scots, the more they resisted. Eventually, they formed a united rebellion against the Church of England's influence within their boundaries by signing the National Covenant. The followers of the movement became known as Covenanters. They made themselves stand out from the crowd by proudly displaying a collar in a deep shade of crimson, earning themselves the nickname Rednecks. Conflict between the Presbyterians and Church of England reached a fever pitch during a period known today as the Killing Time. By 1680, a more radical religious sect developed. Those who opposed the English crown and the compromises of the Hamilton Declaration responded by producing their own list of grievances. The leader of the movement was Richard Cameron, and his followers were soon called Cameronians. Due to their outright rebellion against the established religious laws, the Cameronians and Covenanters were sometimes unable to worship in the churches. As a result, congregations gathered for large outdoor conventicles amongst the fields and hills of the countryside. Therefore, they were labeled with the term hillmen. During the reign of King James, English and Scottish settlers began moving to the Ulster Plantation in Northern Ireland. Over the decades, many Presbyterians made the trek across the waters in hope for more opportunities. While some volunteered for the chance to provide a better life for their family, others arrived on the shores of Ulster after being exiled from their homeland. Once they arrived, Presbyterians found themselves in a difficult position. They were often at odds with both the native Irish population and the English settlers who held the highest positions of authority. During the Glorious Revolution, the Presbyterians in Ireland and Scotland were mostly in favor of deposing the Catholic King James II and instead supported the Protestant William of Orange. They fought on William's side against the Jacobites in Ireland and helped win the conflict. William was also affectionately nicknamed King Billy, and those who supported him were frequently labeled Billy Boys. Thus, the terms of the Covenanter Hillmen and the Ulster Scot Billy Boys subtly blended into one word, hillbilly. When the Church of Ireland was established in Ulster, the Scots were strongly suppressed through a series of penal laws which barred Catholics and Presbyterians alike from the most respected positions. They even went as far as stating that any marriages which took place in a kirk were null and void, making their children illegitimate in the eyes of the court. By the early 1700s, their conditions were becoming bleak, and many chose to migrate to the colonies in America. Some Covenanters had been in the Americas prior to this time period, particularly those Scotsmen who were imprisoned and sent into indentured servitude. However, more than 200,000 of the Presbyterians who settled in the colonies from 1717 to 1775 had migrated from the plantations of Ulster. Due to the religious freedom of Pennsylvania, most settled there first. It didn't take long for the families to travel further south, into Appalachia and the western frontier. The Presbyterian community soon flourished in their new home, and their descendants played a pivotal role in the American Revolution. So much so that the Hessian captain Johann Heinrich said in a private letter, "Call this war, dearest friend, but whatsoever name you may, only call it not an American rebellion. It is nothing more nor less than an Irish-Scotch Presbyterian rebellion." After gaining independence, the offspring of the original Irish-Scots settlers of Appalachia continued to keep their fiery, freedom-loving nature. By the Reconstruction era and the early 20th century, the Scots Irish Democrats began to dominate politics throughout the southern United States. Many of these Democrats would show up to rallies and elections wearing a red necktie, perhaps mimicking the signature accessory of their recent ancestors. One of the most famous examples of Appalachians wearing the red handkerchief as a symbol of rebellion is the Coal Miners' Union uprisings, which developed in West Virginia from 1912 to 1921. Their use of the red bandana was so synonymous with their movement that many began to call the Unionist miners rednecks, once again showing a connection with the heritage that stretched back hundreds of years. The Scots Irish people of the United States have contributed widely to the formation of American law and culture. Davy Crockett, Sam Houston, Neil Armstrong, and 20 U.S. presidents, including Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, all have Scots Irish ancestors.
We've been eager for a chance to return to the Emerald Isle. In particular, we wanted to come here, to Northern Ireland, a place of remarkable beauty and extraordinary history, part of an island with which tens of millions of Americans share an eternal relationship. America's story, in part, began right outside the doors of this gleaming hall. 325 years ago, a ship set sail from the River Lagan for the Chesapeake Bay, filled with men and women who dreamed of building a new life in a new land. They, followed by hundreds of thousands more, helped America write those early chapters. They helped us win our independence. They helped us draft our Constitution. And soon after, America returned to Belfast, opening one of our very first consulates here in 1796, when George Washington was still president. So today, names familiar to many of you are etched on schools and courthouses and solemn memorials of war across the United States. Names like Wilson and Kelly, Campbell and O'Neill. So many of the qualities that we Americans hold dear, we imported from this land. Perseverance, faith, an unbending belief that we make our own destiny, and an unshakable dream that if we work hard and we live responsibly, something better lies just around the bend. So our histories are bound by blood and belief, by culture and by commerce. And our futures are equally, inextricably linked. And that's why I've come to Belfast today.
Chances are that many of the American viewers watching this video have some connection to Ulster Scots in their distant past. While more than 4 million U.S. citizens claim Scots-Irish ancestry, many more are completely unaware of their genealogy. Jim Webb, in his book Born Fighting, estimates that the actual population of those with Scots-Irish heritage could be upwards of 27 million. So, if your last name is...
You might be a redneck.
Thank you for watching. Do you have Scots Irish ancestors? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss future videos.